going back to the Treaty of Westphalia, which is over 300 years old, the idea was that every group of people, every nation, should be able to practice self-determination without outside interference. And it is a very important principle. Obviously, we would be upset if we found out the U.S. or some other country was trying to interfere with our democracy or our system, let's put it that way. On the other hand, as important as sovereignty is, in the last 30 or 40 years, it's been understood that sometimes sovereign governments do horrific things to their citizens. And as human beings, we just can't sit back and do nothing. So it's brought this question to the fore, and as it has been pointed out, every time a government invades another country, they have the best of motives. They're spreading the right religion, they're spreading freedom and democracy, they're preventing human rights abuses, whatever. And almost every time, it's basically a lie. You know, and again, that's what Deborah was talking about. The media campaigns would convince enough people to support, or at least not to oppose, any particular intervention. Occasionally, there are interventions which actually do, I think, create a lesser evil than allowing the barbarism to continue. An example of that was when Vietnam, in response to attacks from the Pol Pot regime in Cambodia, invaded, got rid of Pol Pot. They did it to protect their own people. They were actually being killed in these raids, so it was self-defense, but they also got rid of a genocidal regime. The government in Cambodia is, you know, I wouldn't defend it, but it's not genocidal, and that's something. That's not nothing. On the other hand, and again, has been pointed out, because intervention under any circumstances is risky and people are going to get hurt, the first thing we should try and do is prevent those situations from developing. And one of the things that's critical to do that, and again, this is pointed out in terms of all the literally trillions of dollars that have been given to Wall Street and Canadian banks, and even though it's relatively minor. But that kind of aid, a tiny fraction, something like 10%. If we had said to the world, if we, the richer countries, have said, look, for those nations that are going to cooperate, who aren't going to attack their neighbors, who aren't going to oppress their citizens, we'll provide aid. We'll make sure that every child, you know, gets food every day, that medical care is provided, that no one goes hungry and so on. And all you have to do is treat your citizens well and create a culture and an expectation of better and more humane behavior. I think that's one way, that's one key way to get rid of a lot of tension, a lot of anger, a lot of resentment towards the West. And as has been pointed out, a lot of the violence and the roots of violence go back to Western intervention, which we have to take responsibility for. While there's a number of reasons for that, and we can go into this a little bit later in more detail, and it's complex, I think not the first time Noam Chomsky has it right when he said the most important freedom that we're protecting when we invade Iraq or Afghanistan is the freedom to rob and exploit. Ultimately, that's, I think, what it comes down to. There's other issues. There's fanaticism, there's religious nationalism, whatever. But power and greed tend to be the motive forces for interventions, which is another reason why we have to be very careful before allowing any intervention to take place. So beyond trying to create a global atmosphere where invading other countries is just not done, and that's happened, I think, over the last 50, 60 years. The idea of aggression is much more frowned upon by the world community, by public opinion, than it ever was before. Nations like the United States do not brag about being an empire like the British did, because that's not a good thing, and most people recognize that. So there's also that element of creating sort of a global public opinion which will not stand for human rights abuses and aggression and so on. If, for some reason, a particular regime seems to be very seriously guilty of human rights abuses of its own citizens or invading other countries, then we have to consider first non-violent and peaceful ways to get them to change their opinion and their behavior. It might take some time, but again, it's establishing the idea that because somebody else is violent doesn't mean we're going to imitate that kind of horrific behavior. We're going to try and be smarter and more humane and say, again, offer positive inducements. Whether it's trade, aid, admission to some particular group or whatever, and perhaps offer, or threaten negative repercussions in terms of boycotts or something. But at least try nonviolent, positive and negative actions before resorting to military intervention. Military intervention has to be the absolutely last desperate hope. And my guess is if we took those kinds of positive changes, we'd have very few times when military intervention would be necessary. And I'll stop there because I probably could go on for a long time.